chose this topic because my grandma died from complications of this disease. During this presentation, I kindly ask that there's no talking, you keep your phones off or on silent until the end, you pay attention, be respectful, and hold all questions until the end. Tonight I will give you an introduction about the topic of scleroderma, tell you about who it affects, the different types, how you can get it, how it is diagnosed and the symptoms, as well as steps to help with your symptoms, some costs for treatments, and a video. I also interviewed 3 people over email who work with scleroderma or who have it, and after that I have a Kahoot, which is an online quiz. The word scleroderma comes from 2 Greek words, scleros and derma. Scleros means hard and derma means skin. The hard skin results from an overproduction of collagen, which is a structural protein found in skin and other diseases. The first clear description of scleroderma took place in the mid-1700s by Dr. Carlo Curzio. Compared to other diseases, scleroderma is pretty rare. Scleroderma can affect anyone, but most commonly it affects females. You have a higher chance of getting the disease with a 4-to-1 female to male ratio. It is most commonly diagnosed between the ages of 30 and 50, and an estimated 300,000 Americans have it. Although it is most commonly diagnosed between 30 and 50, anybody can get it at any age. There are 2 main types of scleroderma, and those are broken up even further, but the 2 main types are localized and systematic. If you are diagnosed with localized scleroderma, it doesn't affect any of your organs except the skin, but it can sometimes damage underlying tissues. If you are diagnosed with localized scleroderma, you will live, but the quality of life is negatively impacted due to the pain and swelling of your joints and skin. Systematic scleroderma is the most deadly out of all the rheumatologic diseases. It is the only major form of scleroderma that affects your organs besides your skin. If you are diagnosed with systematic scleroderma, you will, almost all patients, die. Scleroderma is not contagious like the common cold is, but it has a small chance of being genetic. Twins and family members have a higher chance of getting the disease than extended family. Some symptoms could be triggered from exposure to certain chemicals like epoxy resins, solvents, and pesticides. Scleroderma is very difficult to diagnose because of all the symptoms it has are similar to those of other diseases. To diagnose it, it consists of many blood tests and other specialized tests depending on which organs are affected. Scleroderma is classified as a chronic autoimmune disease. Chronic meaning it never goes away, and autoimmune meaning your immune system attacks itself. Symptoms of scleroderma vary from person to person, which is partly why there's no cure right now. The 2 most common early symptoms are hands that are sensitive to cold and or stress, and hands that become puffy and or stiff. This is known as Raynaud's disease. Symptoms mainly depend on which body organs are affected, and scleroderma is slightly different in kids. One step to help with your symptoms would be exercise. Exercise would be great because it will keep your joints and skin flexible so it won't hurt as much to move. You should not smoke because it would make you more tired than you already are, and it would make Raynaud's disease even worse. You should always protect your hands from the cold by wearing gloves or mittens, even when reaching into the fridge or freezer. You should also try to stay away from foods that cause gas or bloating When you sleep, you should also try and keep your head elevated to keep your stomach acids down out of your throat. If you are looking for some prescription drugs to help ease your pain, there are some out there, but often with a hefty price. It could cost as little as $500, but as much as $12,000 a year. If your health insurance does cover the medical costs, you could get reduced. The cost could be reduced by up to 50%. Now a video of a scleroderma patient almost 30 years ago.
Recent breakthroughs in immunology research are creating an explosion of new approaches to immune-related diseases. These breakthroughs are now making their way out of the laboratory and into the lives of patients around the country. Patients like librarian Sue Erickson are already benefiting from immunotherapy. Sue suffers from a painful, crippling, and ultimately fatal disease called scleroderma. Sue's skin is actually shrinking and hardening with each passing day. She has trouble moving her hands and arms. But now, at immunotherapy centers like the one set up by Therapeutic Immunology in Minneapolis, Sue and patients like her are being treated using a new immunotherapy technique called photopheresis. For Sue, it's another name for hope.
I've been on medication for several years, and now we've begun this new therapy. And it has enabled me to be able to function better in my job and at home. And I'm looking forward to the new therapy because it gives me hope that there is a future and that it's longer and that maybe someday there will be a cure.
Unlike standard treatments for immune-related diseases, surgery, drugs, or radiation, immunotherapies like photopheresis offer the patient a non-invasive, safer alternative that puts the body to work curing itself. Blood is drawn from the patient, separated into red blood cells, plasma cells, and leukocytes. The red cells are returned to the patient almost immediately, while the plasma cells and leukocytes are exposed to intense ultraviolet light. This alters the genetic makeup of the cells in such a way that, when returned to the body, these treated cells stimulate the body's natural immune system, which destroys the remaining disease cells over time. Because of the extraordinary pace of change in this field, the current challenge is sharing all the new information being gathered, so patients across the country can both benefit and contribute to these breakthroughs.
There's been tremendous progress in immunology. As this new knowledge is applied to new therapeutic techniques, it's critically important that the results of these treatments be collected, pooled, analyzed, and disseminated to other treating physicians for the benefit of their patients. We want to ensure that state-of-the-art immunotherapies are available to patients and that physicians know about them.
The Medical Information Sharing Network, Minn, was created to fill this void. By linking research institutes and medical and scientific review boards to the Clinical Institute by computer, Minn provides the latest treatment options, training, and patient outcome information to immunotherapy centers around the country through its up-to-the-minute network. And as for patients like Sue Erickson, being a part of this cutting-edge medical treatment and research has made her life full of hope for a pain-free future. The future is full of exciting new applications of immunotherapy for other patients as well. Rheumatoid arthritis, MS, lupus, as well as promising new approaches to cancer treatments and organ transplants all may involve immunotherapy someday. And thanks to Minn, that day may be sooner than we think. I'm Brent Johnson reporting from Minneapolis.
I interviewed 3 people over email with some questions I had about scleroderma. One person was Elaine Robashkin. She said I asked them what was their role with the Scleroderma Foundation. She said she's a part of the board of directors of the Minnesota chapter. The next person I interviewed was Carrie Connolly, and she told me she is director of programs and services of the Scleroderma Foundation. Finally, I interviewed Leslie Saketku. She is a scleroderma expert, a doctor, and she's a medical advisor to the Scleroderma Foundation. My next question was, what types of programs are available to those who suffer from scleroderma and their families? Elaine said there are currently 5 groups that meet monthly. There are also walks and fundraisers that you could participate in. Carrie said there are many support groups, educational meetings, a phone support line, and more. I then asked, do you feel the support from the Scleroderma community has helped educate the patient, their families, and the general public? Elaine said the internet has helped tremendously in educating more people more easily. She used to not know anybody with Scleroderma until she got involved with it. Carrie said it's helped a lot with psychological support, as people suffering from Scleroderma can often feel alone or secluded because of the few number of people who have it. My next question is anyone closer to finding a cure for Scleroderma more than they were 10 to 20 years ago? Elaine said a lot of progress has been made with medical advancements and such. She also said it was hard to find a cure because of all the symptoms it has. Carrie said they are still a ways away, but much closer than they have been. She feels we will see a treatment available soon. Leslie said many scientists, physicians are working hard to find a cure or at least a better treatment. Then I asked, how has the diagnosis of Scleroderma changed over time? Elaine told me it is easier to diagnose if you have common symptoms and rapid skin thickening. She said a diagnosis could potentially still take years to get. Carrie said doctors and tests are quicker at recognizing it and a much better process of diagnosing it. Leslie said more and more doctors are educated and aware of Scleroderma, so the skin doesn't have to be involved for them to diagnose you with it. Then I asked Leslie, how did you get involved with treatment/research related to Scleroderma? She said she has strong feelings for all of her patients, but especially those with Scleroderma because of the challenges that they face day to day. I then asked Leslie, what have you learned from your patients? She said she's learned a lot about being gracious and having dignity in the face of pain. She's also learned a lot about the disease from patients and what works for them, so she can sometimes recommend it to others if they are suffering from the same symptoms. Because Elaine was diagnosed with Scleroderma, I came up with a few more questions for her. My first was, how does Scleroderma impact your daily life from the time of diagnosis to present day? She said at the time of diagnosis, the only effective drugs at the time didn't work for her. She also couldn't help with chores and her kids as much as she would like to. Today, she says her skin has softened and she's avoided the more serious effects of the disease. Next, I asked, how has Scleroderma affected your friends and family? She said they were both very supportive of her, and her husband helped a lot with what she couldn't do around the house because of her hands. Then I asked, are there tasks that are more of a challenge now than before diagnosis? She said any task involving her hands is hard to do because of stiffness and swelling. Next, I asked, what doctors does she see and how often does she see them? She says she sees a nephrologist 2 times a year, which is a kidney doctor. She sees an internist, rheumatologist, dermatologist, gynecologist, and pulmonologist annually. She also sees a dentist 3 times a year. Another question I asked her was, how has Scleroderma impacted your diet and or exercise? She said she avoids certain foods because of a kidney transplant she had to have. She also couldn't use weights or lift heavy stuff after her transplant for a while. My next question was, what are the daily precautions you take to ensure your health is stable? She said she takes all of her prescribed medication every day, and she pays attention to her hands if If they get cold, she wears gloves. She also tries to drink lots of water and tries to stay away from alcohol as often as possible. My final question was, how has your medication regime changed from diagnosis to today? She said she still takes the same exact 2 pills, except one is now new and improved. Patients now have more options for treatments and therapies than she did 20 years ago. And now, go to kahoot.it, the same as Sean.